You are tuned to Radio Peking. A Peking People's Daily editorial on Saturday exposes the U.S. imperialist plot to use the United Nations as a smokescreen for its criminal aggression in Vietnam and to legalize its stepped-up aggression there. The editorial is entitled, "The U.S. aggressors cannot be allowed to hide in the United Nations." It is the third in a series of People's Daily editorials since the United States launched the armed aggression against the Vietnam Democratic Republic. The editorial begins with a condemnation of the crude American violations of the Geneva Agreements, refuting Johnson's thick-skinned attempts to parade as a defender of the agreements. The editorial says that the United States government has never taken the Geneva Agreements seriously and has violated them without scruple from the very first. This is the root cause of the tension and unrest in the Indochina situation. Johnson's pretenses that the armed U.S. aggression against the Democratic Republic of Vietnam is designed to secure respect for the existing agreements in this area are too laughable for words. Great vigilance is called for by the fact that U.S. imperialism actually presents charges to the UN Security Council after its own open and large-scale raids against the Democratic Republic of Vietnam. The editorial says, "There are some good-hearted people who think that the situation will relax when they see the United States raising the question in the United Nations. There are others who deliberately applaud or work for this American move simply because they are fellow conspirators. This is unforgivable, especially in those who bear responsibility towards the 1954 Geneva Agreements." The editorial emphasizes that the United Nations have absolutely no right to deal with the Indochina problems. If a peaceful solution to this problem is really to be sought, it must be through the channels of the Geneva Agreements. The People's Daily points out that the U.S. government has the following aims in raising the so-called Gulf of Tonkin incident at the UN Security Council. First, to place the United States in the seat of the accuser. Second, to seek legalization of the American aggression against the Democratic Republic of Vietnam as an accomplished fact. 3, if it achieves the first two aims, to establish a precedent for the United Nations to handle Indochina problems, casting aside the Geneva Conference. 4, when the need and possibility arise in the future, to scrape together a so-called United Nations army and turn Vietnam into a second Korea. The People's Daily emphasizes the extremely cunning character of this plot. The peace-loving countries and peoples of the whole world must be on their guard. The U.S. aggressors, whose hands are already covered with blood, must not be allowed to use the United Nations as a protective charm for themselves. That was a summary of Saturday's Peking People's Daily editorial. The U.S. aggressors cannot be allowed to hide in the United Nations.
You are listening to Radio Peking.
U.S. imperialism's brazen starving and bombing of the territory of the Vietnam Democratic Republic has aroused immense indignation among the entire Chinese people. On Friday, 500,000 people in Peking held a mammoth demonstration in blistering heat. The angry masses went into the streets from all corners of the city and streamed to the embassy of the Vietnam Democratic Republic. thousands upon thousands of people shouted slogans, voicing firm support for the just struggle of the Vietnamese people to resist aggression. They strongly protested at the U.S. imperialist armed aggression against the Vietnam Democratic Republic. A little after 9 o'clock in the morning, contingents of demonstrators from factories, people's communes, schools, government departments, as well as democratic parties and popular organizations began to converge on the site of the Vietnamese embassy. They handed letters of support to the Vietnamese ambassador to China, Chen Du-bin, pledging that the 650 million people of China firmly stand by their fraternal people of Vietnam. Expressing resolute support for the statements issued by the governments of China and the Vietnam Democratic Republic, the letters pointed out that aggression by the United States against the Democratic Republic of Vietnam means aggression against China. The Chinese people will absolutely not sit idly by without lending a helping hand. The U.S. government must be held responsible for all the grave consequences arising from this. Accepting the letters of support, Ambassador Chen Du-bin warmly shook hands with the representatives of various organizations. He said in Chinese, "The people of Vietnam and China are brothers. We fight shoulder to shoulder. We shall win." Peking's militiamen, all carrying their arms, marched valiantly in the demonstration. They pledged to perfect their military skill, make good preparations, and support the Vietnamese people's struggle against U.S. aggression by all ways and means.
That was a report on the demonstrations in Peking on Friday, supporting the just struggle of the Vietnamese people in resisting U.S. armed aggression.
You're listening to Radio Peking. We're now bringing you excerpts from an eyewitness account of the battle against the U.S. air raiders and the capture of an American airman in Hanoi, the Vietnam Democratic Republic. This report, written by Luk Van Tao and Nguyen Thu Thai, was carried in the Vietnamese paper Lien Dien. August 5th was a calm, sunny day. A mixed atmosphere of peaceful labor and joyful relaxation prevailed over the coastal town of Hanoi. The beach was crowded with holidaymakers, workers, office workers, public servants, students, and children. This peaceful atmosphere was suddenly broken when at 2:40 in the afternoon, groups of U.S. planes appeared in the skies. They dived and struck the vicinity of Hanoi town. Their flight route showed that the raid had been long planned. The enemy hoped that with their surprise attack, they could massacre our people and destroy our villages and town without any retaliation. But our anti-aircraft artillery opened fire immediately when the first group of aircraft dived. An enemy plane is in smoke. Go on firing. 2 more volleys were discharged. One of the enemy planes left formation, wavered, and then came down like a dead leaf. The downing of the first plane caused panic among the enemy. They zoomed up and became lethargic. But later, they swooped down again and fired blindly. 3 jets darted down from high altitude, the U.S. flag on them clearly seen. They strafed at the ferry landing, wounding 3 citizens taking shelter there. Other enemy planes were strafing a woman walking towards the river and fired at another woman who was pregnant. They thought these unarmed women would be easy prey, but the invaders got their well-earned punishment. Another enemy plane had hardly begun nosing down from 6,000-meter altitude when our bullets hit it full on. This stopped its diving. It left its group and trailed smoke across the blue sky. The heroic deeds of our men defy description. What they did during the fight was a source of inspiration to all. Second Lieutenant Chen Duk-Chun was hit by a shrapnel from a rocket, but with his hand on his wound, he remained at his commanding post to direct operations. Another example of valor is Armyman First Class Din Van Lu. He did not hesitate to go to the highest point to signal to another combat unit when the enemy was raining bullets on his position. The whole of Hongdae followed the heroic fight of its beloved fighters. As soon as the firing ceased, some 50 miners drove bulldozers to the scene to help the armymen to repair the damaged defense works and prepare for the next combat. An atmosphere of joy reigned over Hongdae when our men brought in a U.S. pilot on a small vessel. The U.S. captive was white with terror and walked ashore dejectedly. What a different man he was when he was in the plane attacking. He is U.S. Lieutenant Pilot Everett Alvarez, Jr. This American POW told us, "Your first volleys frightened me, and then it was real fear till my craft was hit." That was an eyewitness account of the battle against the U.S. air raiders on August 5th in Hongdae, the Vietnam Democratic Republic.
Here is the news. Following is the communique issued today by the Council of Ministers of the Democratic Republic of Vietnam. On August 6, 1964, the Council of Ministers of the Democratic Republic of Vietnam met under the chairmanship of Premier Phan Van Dong. The Council heard reports on the present acts of provocation and sabotage recently committed by the U.S. imperialists against the Democratic Republic of Vietnam, particularly the fact that on August 5, 1964, U.S. aircraft bombed and scrapped a number of places in North Vietnam territory, and the very heroic and successful fighting of our anti-aircraft and naval units. The Council of Ministers unanimously asserts the fact that the United States used aircraft to bomb and scrap a number of places in North Vietnam is a premeditated and extremely serious war action on the part of the United States government against the Democratic Republic of Vietnam. is an extremely gross violation of the 1954 Geneva Agreement on Indochina and has increased further the danger of war expansion in Indochina and Southeast Asia. All acts of provocation and aggression against the Democratic Republic of Vietnam will certainly be defeated by the strength of the entire Vietnamese people. The United States government and its parties must bear full responsibility for all the grave consequences brought about by the war-seeking acts in this area. The government of the Democratic Republic of Vietnam energetically denounces to world opinion the extremely dangerous war moves of the U.S. government and demands that the United States government stop at once all acts of provocation and sabotage against the Democratic Republic of Vietnam, stop its aggressive war in South Vietnam, and scrupulously implement the 1954 Geneva Agreement on Vietnam. The Council of Ministers warmly praises the great successes of our people in the fight against the air attacks by the enemy, commends the heroic fighting spirit of the cadets and fighters of our anti-aircraft and naval units, and their determination to annihilate the enemy, wholeheartedly commends the exploit of the units and fighters who have brought down enemy planes. The Council of Ministers warmly congratulates the cadets and people in the area attacked by the enemy for having upheld their vigilance, their readiness to oppose the enemy, and for having courageously cooperated with the army to annihilate the enemy. The entire Vietnamese people are still elated at the big victory and the matchless heroism of our army and people in the fight against enemy on August 5, 1964. The Council of Ministers calls on the People's Army, the People's Security Armed Forces, or the People's Armed Forces, and the entire people to heighten further their vigilance, kindly attend to mass and defense, always stand ready to fight and smash the sabotage acts of the U.S. imperialists and the Nazis, and at the same time push forward the patriotic emulation movement in the spirit of everyone redoubling his efforts, with the determination to also fulfill the state plan in the immediate future to strive to obtain a bumper all-sided atom crack, strive to build North Vietnam as a firm basis for the struggle for the peaceful reunification of the country. Following U.S. naval intrusion into the territorial waters of the Democratic Republic of Vietnam on July 30th to August 3rd, the United States government on August 5th ordered its naval aircraft to bomb and strike the coastal areas of the Democratic Republic of Vietnam under the pretext of its intention that U.S. warships were again attacked on August 4th by North Vietnamese torpedo boats. The U.S. story of what it called the second attack on its destroyers, aircraft, and planetoids is an out-and-out fabrication. It is full of half-truths and contains self-contradictory remarks. At a press conference held in Hanoi yesterday afternoon, Colonel Han Lo, on behalf of the Vietnam People's Army, gave several documents on 6 pages of the U.S. imperialists provoking and attacking the territories of the Democratic Republic of Vietnam in the past few days. Referring to the so-called second Tonkin Gulf incident of August 1st, Colonel Han Lo said,
"In spite of the plot to invade South Vietnam, provoke and sabotage North Vietnam, the U.S. imperialists have sent a part of the Soviet fleet to operate regularly in the South China Sea, including the aircraft carrier Ticonderoga at anchor on the high seas off Guano. This naval unit is composed of the aircraft carrier Ticonderoga and 4 destroyers: Harry Hubble, Edison, Samuel Moore, and Buffalo. On July 31st, 1964, the U.S. imperialists dispatched the destroyer Mad Dog to the Gulf of Tonkin. And on August the 3rd, the destroyer Taylor Joy appeared in the same Gulf. It is precisely these two destroyers which have many times carried out provocative acts in our territorial waters and have on many occasions penetrated deep into North Vietnam's territorial waters to carry out provocative acts. On the night of July the 3rd and July the 4th, 1964, the joint outer warships of the Ticonderoga squad and warships of the South Vietnam administration in strapping on and down along the coast of Van Diemen. According to reports reaching here, on the morning of August the 1st, 1964, the destroyer Harry Hubble of the U.S. imperialists met the warships HQ-609 and HQ-11 of the South Vietnam Navy on the high sea 60 kilometers east of Van Nuys Port. On the night of the same day, in the international waters, people heard the gunfire, saw flares going up, and aircraft were circling over. It is clear that this was a premeditated trick. On the morning of August the 4th, 1964, the aircraft carrier Constellation left Hong Kong. At 20 hours on the Sunday, the U.S. imperialists ordered the warships to open fire and shoot flares on the high sea off of the Democratic Republic of Vietnam, and U.S. aircraft kept circling all day long and throughout the night. At 23 hours on August the 4th, 1964, President Johnson called a second session of the National Security Council, and on the morning of August the 6th, 1964, the U.S. government issued a statement on the second attack by North Vietnam's Navy. According to FEVC, at 8 a.m. on August the 5th, President Johnson met with Secretaries of State, the chairman of the U.S. Joint Chief of Staff, and leading members of the Republican and Democrat parties in the U.S. Congress, and exchanged views with the candidate of the Republican Party, Barry Goldwater. At 11 hours, Johnson read a message over the U.S. television. At 12 hours, McNamara held a press conference, and at 12:30 hours, U.S. aircraft began striking a number of places in North Vietnam. These above effects have exposed Johnson's lie, making his statement that after the destroyer Mad Dog was chased from the Democratic Republic of Vietnam territorial waters on July 2nd, 1964, he only ordered the dispatch of the destroyer Taylor Joy to the Gulf of North Vietnam, and that U.S. warship did not violate the Democratic Republic of Vietnam waters, but only operated in international waters. In this connection, even those who know very little about military questions can understand that with the speech of a destroyer starting from the Philippines and receiving orders on August 2nd, 1964, Taylor Joy could not arrive in the Gulf of North Vietnam on August 1st. The meeting between Hubble and HQ-11 and HQ-609 is nothing but a collusion between the U.S. imperialists and their followers in South Vietnam to carry out their premeditated scheme to sabotage the Democratic Republic of Vietnam. Colonel Hubble knows, once again pointed out, that the so-called second attack by the Democratic Republic of Vietnam naval forces on U.S. warships is a sheer fabrication by the U.S. aimed at covering up its tyrannical acts, which on many occasions brazenly violated the security of the Democratic Republic of Vietnam and grossly violated the 1954 Geneva Agreement on Indochina, aggravating the danger of extending a war in Indochina, threatening peace in Southeast Asia and the world. It is precisely the U.S. imperialists who have carried out aggressive and provocative acts against the Democratic Republic of Vietnam. They must bear full responsibility for the serious consequences arising from their adventurous acts, especially the brazen provocative acts which have taken place since July the 30th, 1964. Colonel Havendo announced that according to further reports from various army units during the battles of August the 5th, the anti-aircraft batteries of the Vietnam People's Army shot down 8 U.S. aircraft and punished 3 others. He added that the U.S. pilot captured by a Vietnam People's Army anti-aircraft unit had been identified as Everett Alvarez Jr., born on December the 21st, 1937, lieutenant pilot of a jet plane of the VA-144F squadron, with a trooper from the carrier Constellation EVA-64.
You are listening to the news from Radio Peking. The Peking People's Daily today published another editorial, sternly refuting the pretexts under which the United States has committed aggression against the Vietnam Democratic Republic. It pointed out that the hateful features of the U.S. aggressors cannot be covered up. The editorial said, "The deliberate armed aggression unleashed by U.S. imperialism against the Vietnam Democratic Republic came after long premeditation. Lyndon Johnson and his like have told many lies in an attempt to cover up their crimes and to mislead and paralyze the naive and the timid, so as to give themselves a free hand in enlarging the war still further." The People's Daily editorial noted that the Johnson administration's armed aggression against the Vietnam Democratic Republic is intended to save U.S. imperialism from its failure in Indochina and to gain political capital so that Johnson can hold on to the presidential throne in the coming U.S. elections. The aggression is also intended to enlarge the war in Indochina, and using this as an accomplished fact to drag in the allies of the United States. But Johnson and his group have completely miscalculated. Speaking to the headman of U.S. imperialism, the editorial said, "You had better come to your senses. Have you completely forgotten the lessons of your fiasco in your war of aggression against Korea? Johnson is using war adventures to compete with Goldwater for the favor of the U.S. monopoly groups and keep himself in politics." The editorial says, "Those who play with fire will only be consumed in the flames." On the United States' attempts to drag others into the trouble, the editorial pointed out that it has become more and more difficult for the United States to find accomplices. The People's Daily editorial concludes, "All the signs are that the Johnson administration is going ahead step by step with its plan to enlarge the war. The people of the whole world must open their eyes and get a clear view of the situation and firmly smash U.S. imperialism's criminal scheme to enlarge the war in Indochina." In Peking today, the Dagung Bao, Guangming Daily, and Workers' Daily also carried editorials strongly condemning the criminal U.S. aggression. The Dagung Bao editorial was called, "The Chinese people will never sit idly by while the United States encroaches on the Vietnam Democratic Republic." The Guangming Daily editorial bears the title, U.S. imperialist encroachments on the Vietnam Democratic Republic will not be tolerated. The Workers' Daily editorial is entitled, Solid Support for the Vietnamese People in their counterblows against U.S. armed aggression. These editorials all warned U.S. imperialism that the Chinese people will never sit idly by while the United States encroaches on the Vietnam Democratic Republic. Should the American aggressors fail to stop their armed aggression and provocations against the Vietnam Democratic Republic immediately, they will have to bear the responsibility for all the serious consequences.
And again, later on the same day, the 7th of August, 1964, more from Radio Peking.
You are listening to Radio Peking. We now bring a report by a Sinton News Agency correspondent exposing the fact that the U.S. attack on the Vietnam Democratic Republic is a long, premeditated act of aggression. The report says, following U.S. naval intrusion into the territorial waters of the Democratic Republic of Vietnam on August 2nd, the U.S. government brazenly ordered its naval aircraft to bomb coastal cities of the Vietnam Democratic Republic under the pretext of its invention that U.S. warships were again attacked on Tuesday by Vietnamese torpedo boats. This new U.S. provocation and the series of U.S. military activities before and after it pointed unmistakably to the fact that the incident in the Gulf of Tonkin was a naked act of aggression premeditated by the United States. After the August 2nd provocation on North Vietnamese waters by the U.S. destroyer Maddox, the United States government came out with a false charge that unprovoked attack was made on U.S. forces. But this peace-trying soft-peace sounded very incredible even to some Western reporters. An Agence France Press dispatch of August 3rd pointed out that the American destroyer's behavior appeared surprising and the U.S. claims sounded somewhat flawless. The U.S. story of what he called the second attack on Tuesday on its destroyers Maddox and Turner Joy is an out-and-out fabrication, which has been severely refuted by Vietnam in a statement. Facts show that the U.S. government had made a series of military deployments before and after the August 2nd provocation, so that it could create new pretexts for invading the Democratic Republic of Vietnam according to plan. The Sinton correspondent report says, after the invading U.S. destroyer Maddox met with self-defense action from the Vietnamese side, U.S. President Lyndon Johnson flagrantly gave order on August 3rd for continuing provocative patrolling on the Gulf of Tonkin in double strength. He ordered the provision of combat air patrol for the destroyers and proclaimed that all attackers should not only be driven off, but be destroyed. An Agence France Press dispatch from Washington on August 4th said that 5 U.S. warships, including the aircraft carrier Constellation and the destroyers Preston and Stella of the U.S. Southern Fleet, left Hong Kong within 24 hours after Johnson issued his order. He said there was no official denial of reports that their destination was the Gulf of Tonkin. United Press International revealed on August 3rd that the U.S. aircraft carrier Ticonderoga, operating off Vietnam, had moved about 100 miles to the north. A part of the U.S. Southern Fleet stationing in the Taiwan Strait also left for the Gulf of Tonkin on August 3rd. All this shows that the U.S. aggressors have planned to create fresh trouble in the Gulf of Tonkin. The report of the Sinpo correspondent continues. In fact, the incident of the Gulf of Tonkin and the U.S. attack on the Democratic Republic of Vietnam were launched after long premeditation by the U.S. aggressors. In late June, U.S. Secretary of State Dean Rusk raised war cries in an anonymous statement, saying that the United States was prepared to introduce the war into northern Vietnam. After Maxwell Taylor was appointed ambassador to South Vietnam, the U.S. government has been speeding up preparations for intensifying and extending the war of aggression. Recently, the U.S. and the Yuan country have constantly clamored for an attack on the Democratic Republic of Vietnam. Hence, the intensified U.S. naval and air provocations against the Vietnam Democratic Republic. On July 30th, the U.S. Yuan fleet sent naval vessels to bombard the Republic's islands, Hon Mu and Hon Le. Furthermore, the United States has sent its aircraft from Laos to bomb and fire rockets on the Vietnam Democratic Republic. The report of the Sinpo correspondent says, the fact that the U.S. aggressors are bent on extending step by step the war to the northern part of Vietnam is no news, nor any secret to the press of all countries. The Japanese paper Mainichi Shimbun carried a dispatch from its Washington correspondent on June 2nd, saying that the U.S. authorities were adopting a bi-stage strategy in Southeast Asia. The first stage had begun in the form of reconnaissance strikes over Laos by U.S. military aircraft. For the second stage, it was planned that U.S. aircraft carriers would be sent to North Vietnamese waters. U.S. military aircraft would fly along the borders of North and South Vietnam. U.S. military aircraft would intrude over North Vietnam. U.S. Marines would be stationed in the northern part of Thailand. Commanders would be sent into the Vietnam Democratic Republic for destructive activities, and the Republic's industrial installations would be bombed. It is clear from all this that the incident engineered by the U.S. aggressors in the Gulf of Tonkin is part of their long, premeditated plot for aggression. Their attempt to represent themselves as the victim of aggression and attack by the Vietnam Democratic Republic can fool nobody. You have just heard a Sinpo correspondent's report exposing the U.S. attack on the Vietnam Democratic Republic as a long, premeditated act of aggression.
And this concludes our program for this transmission. You have been listening to Radio Teaching.